In 1988, the Transformers franchise was searching for new ways to innovate. In its 5th year, a robot simply turning into a car or a jet wasn't exciting enough anymore, and new types of gimmicks and play features had begun to take hold. The involvement of humans and other organic life forms in Transformers stories was only growing. Transformers had been making friends with them since the inception of the brand, and the previous year, the Transformers had become partially organic themselves by bonding their bodies and minds with humans and human-like aliens as headmasters and target masters. 1988's new range of figures took that line of thought to its next logical step. What if Transformers were able to actually disguise themselves as organic life forms? These are the basics on those that hide the Transformer inside. Pretenders. Pretender Transformer toys came with large hollow shells that split in two, inside which the robot was hidden, pretending to be a different creature. The Autobot shells all took the form of humans wearing armoured spacesuits, while the Decepticons posed as a variety of monsters. When the Transformer was removed from inside the shell itself could be reassembled, essentially giving kids 2 action figures in one. The robots within did still transform, of course, but the need for them to fit inside the shells resulted in rather homogeneous, slender robot designs with very abstract vehicle modes. Variations on the Pretender theme that rolled out alongside the standard figures included the Pretender Beasts, robots who turned into 4-legged robotic animals within organic animal shells, and the Pretender Vehicles, which rather seemed to miss the point of the concept, as their shells were simply large vehicles they hid within. The Pretender concept continued into 1989, though this year's new figures were smaller in size with more identifiable alternate modes. Plus, new variations of Pretenders also introduced this year included Pretender Classics, Jazz, Grimlock, Bumblebee, and Starscream, popular characters from the earlier years of the franchise revived as Pretenders. Pretender Monsters, a team of 6 diminutive Decepticons who could combine to form the larger robot Monstructor, each inside a flexible rubber monster shell. Mega Pretenders, pretenders whose shells also transformed, with which the inner robots could combine to create a super vehicle, and Ultra Pretenders, the Russian nesting doll of the Pretender line, a robot with a transforming shell that was itself contained inside a second, larger vehicle shell. One abandoned concept was the Double Pretenders, animal monster shells containing 2 small robots who could combine into one. But in recent years, this idea was finally brought to life through a variety of stories and exclusive toys released through the Transformers Collectors Club. Like previous toy gimmicks, such as the Headmasters, precisely how Pretender technology worked in-universe varied from story to story, with 2 main interpretations coming into being, one used by Hasbro in the West, and the other by Takara in Japan. Hasbro's approach was to have the stories mirror the toys precisely, with Transformers wearing biomechanical shells made out of synthetic flesh. The shells could be mentally controlled by their owners, even when they were outside of them, essentially letting them be in 2 places at once, but any damage to the shell would be felt by the Transformer via their mental link. With the Pretenders having arrived too late to feature in the animated series, which had ended in 1987, this take on their story was told through the Marvel comic, in which Decepticon headmaster leader Scorponok was initially credited with inventing the technology. But flashbacks in later issues would show certain Pretender characters having shells in the distant past, contradicting that claim. Regardless, the Autobots soon stole the technology from the Decepticons and replicated it with their warriors. This did mean that the Autobots ran around looking like giant humans, which isn't much of a disguise at all, except when dealing with unwitting alien life forms, but the comic compensated by downplaying the idea of the shells as disguise, and instead focusing on the combat advantages they offered. Over in Japan, meanwhile, Pretenders weren't translated from toy to fiction so literally. Rather than depict them as robots inside shells, as Hasbro had chosen to do, the Japanese take on the Pretenders, which was related through the Japanese original animated series, Super God Master Force, and its associated media, revolved around the idea of Transformers believably disguising themselves as organic beings. using a device known as an Earth Gather, which drew on the power of the Earth itself to accomplish the process. The Japanese pretenders were able to shrink their bodies down and undergo a conversion that actually transformed them from metal into living flesh. Per the Master Force story, the Pretenders arrived on Earth during the Stone Age, and while the Decepticons used their monster forms to terrorize early man, inspiring many of our myths and legends about fantastical beasts, the Autobots, led by new Japanese exclusive original character Metal Hawk, took the forms of humans to live among mankind and defend them. Now, far fewer Pretender toys were released in Japan than in America, and it was only the regular figures who were sold under the Pretender name, and who were shown to have this special shrinking and changing ability. What few of the more ostentatious 1989 toys were sold in Japan weren't marketed as Pretenders there, and when they appeared in the next animated series, Transformers Victory, they played by American rules rather than Master Force ones, and used shells instead. Though 1989 would mark the end of the Pretenders' role in the original Transformers toy line, the idea of Transformers steadily becoming more and more biomechanical did continue, with the 1990s Beast Wars series eventually depicting robots capable of converting directly into organic alternate modes. Subsequently, comics from both Dreamwave Productions and Fun Publications connected the dots, proposing that the Beast Warriors' integrated organic technology was an in-universe evolution of Pretender tech. Outside of this, as one of the stranger gimmicks of the Generation 1 era, the presence of Pretender technology in Transformers lore has been limited in the 30 years following its introduction. Thanks to the Marvel comic, certain Pretender characters, like the skeletal samurai Bludgeon or the Matrix-coveting Mega Pretender Thunderwing, became cult favourites, and would return in future series in non-Pretender forms. But the Pretender concept itself has seen only limited use in modern media, in ways as varied as the original Hasbro and Takara takes were. IDW Publishing's comic books, for example, followed the Marvel lead, essentially ignoring the idea of Pretenders as a form of disguise, and focusing instead on the benefits of a power-enhancing armoured shell. In this version of events, Pretender shells were invented by Thunderwing as a form of protective symbiotic carapace that he hoped would allow the Transformers to survive the coming of a cataclysm which he foresaw would devastate Cybertron. Unfortunately, when a disgusted Megatron shut down his experiments, Thunderwing tested the process on himself and was turned into an unhinged monster who wound up causing the cataclysm he had feared. In the present day, Bludgeon and his followers tried to revive the technology, but the still flawed process wound up trapping Bludgeon inside an immobile shell. It would later be perfected by the Autobots, who used it to shield their bodies from the decaying effects of the parallel world known as the Dead Universe. The 2009 live-action movie, Revenge of the Fallen, on the other hand, took the opposite route, focusing on the disguise aspect, doing away with shells entirely, and featuring a Decepticon Pretender with a Beast Wars-style integrated organic alternate mode, who could literally transform into a human. Under the alias of Alice, this undercover Decepticon menaced Sam Witwicky at college, with some on-the-nose dialogue alluding to her true nature as a pretender early on.
So how about tonight you pretend I'm your girlfriend, and I pretend that you're my boyfriend?
At the script stage, her human form was going to be justified as the result of the Decepticon simply scanning a theme park's animatronic Alice in Wonderland figure. But this didn't make it into the film, and stories in ancillary media explored the character a little more, revealing she had impersonated other actual humans over the years. But that's all just in media. It's taken until right now, 30 years later, for Pretenders to make a return to toy store shelves as part of the Power of the Primes toy line. This new range of figures reinvents several of the original Pretender characters as Prime Masters, tiny robots infused with the power of the original 13 Primes. Prime Masters can connect to other Transformers and share those powers with them, which makes them prime targets for any bot seeking to increase their strength. So to keep themselves hidden, the Prime Masters don so-called decoy armor, their Pretender shells, which can also convert into weapons for larger bots to wield. Now, we might see some Prime Masters in the Power of the Primes cartoon when it premieres later this year, but based on the way these cartoons have been going so far, I wouldn't put any money on it. Then again, you know what they say about pretenders. And those are the basics on pretenders. What's your preferred take on the concept? Do you like shells? Do you prefer the Masterforce or Movieverse approach? Shout out in the comments and I won't pretend that I don't want you to like, share and subscribe.